Hello everyone, thank you for joining me. My name is Unicole Unicron. It is my honor to have your attention. And today's topic is on free will. And does free will exist? What does it mean to think free will exists or not think free will exists? And all the implications of that. I don't know that we're going to hit every implication of free will, but I have been thinking about it for about a week and a half straight. And I'm excited to share with you the way that I envision free will. So the traditional question of free will is, do we have the ability to govern our own actions? Are we just, usually I think the idea is that, like, if time doesn't exist, would we always make the same decisions? Are we predestined to make these same decisions? And I think from that perspective, maybe we are, maybe we don't have free will. But then we have to ask ourselves, are we kind of just algorithms that are living out in a simulation? And this is just one way to think about it. I don't mean to freak you out and, make you feel like a machine necessarily, but we do have a lot of different limitations on how we see the world and on how we interact with the world. And if we are just these sort of algorithms enacting our reality, then most of the time we're doing the best job that we can. I think everyone would say that about themselves. So given certain life experiences, does that cause our actions to be predetermined? And these certain life experiences are things like your previous experiences, your upbringing, your trauma, your lack of guidance, or your lack of information at any given point. It's not to say that you make the same choice over and over again. Sometimes we do. But usually we make a certain choice a certain number of times, and then we make a different choice. And so the question is, was that always the path? Was that always the case? No matter when or where we are in time? A lot of times we are making decisions out of avoidance of pain or because we're afraid. Maybe you could think of these choices as empowered or unempowered choices. Maybe you feel like you are making a decision that is harmful to you or other people because you were unempowered to make another decision. I think, at least for me in my life, that's been the case. If I have ever caused harm on someone, it's not because I intended to harm them. It's because I was not empowered with information or with support or with previous experiences to make a decision that would be less harmful. So in that way, you could think of yourself as maybe not having free will, because we're always doing our best. And I guess at that point, you could say your choice is to not do your best and to intentionally harm people, or to do your best and not make harm. There's, I think, at least 3 levels of perception when it comes to free will. And I think the landscape of what free will is changes at each of these 3 levels. And we can use the New Age words of 3D and 5D. And I think there's 3D, I think there's a middle place, and then I think there's 5D. So I'll explain what I mean. In the 3D reality, having free will is like an ego state. And it can feel really shameful and really frustrating to think that we don't have free will, because from that ego state we want to have power and we want to have control over our destinies, and to think that we don't have that can feel like an ego hit. It can feel shameful because we want to feel like we are in power and we are in control, and that's how the ego feels about it. And that's not necessarily the wrong way to think. So ego is holding us in this space of seeing decisions. And I think free will comes down to this idea of decisions and of how we make decisions. So free will from the ego state is the idea that we get to make good or bad decisions. This is the duality, good versus evil. Are you going to choose to be a good person, or are you going to choose to be an evil person? I just recently finished watching Manifest, so I love that show. At the end of the show, they said, oh my God, they had this like little epiphany, and they didn't go into it, but I just loved it so much. They said, all this time we've been thinking that we were being judged If you've seen this show, you know what I'm talking about. If you don't worry about it. Just know it's on this topic. All this time we thought we were being judged off good or bad. But really what's happening is that we need to work on forgiveness because our hearts actually have to be light in order to be weighed against a feather. And they kind of zoomed past it, like that's all they said about it. But I really did like that because I think it represents this idea of in the ego state, in 3D, we do feel like there is good versus evil. As we ascend into a higher vibration, then I think free will turns into this question of, okay, maybe I'm not in control. I'm not necessarily okay with that. And you feel like you're maybe a victim to life, but you also know that there's nothing you can do about it. So how do you move forward in this other state where things just keep seeming to happen to you? You're trying to get out of this duality reality. You're trying to see things as divine, but you can't yet. And I think from that place, the phrase that has helped me most that I came up with is, you can choose to see the value or suffer. And in that middle place between 3D and 5D, that is your free will. That is where your free will exists. And if you focus on that, that allows your ego to feel like you do have power and you do have control over your reality and over your fate and over your destiny, because you are choosing to either see the value or to suffer. I do believe that what's really going on here, as far as I can tell from my limited perspective, is that everything really is divine and that there really isn't any bad decision or right decision. I think it's all a playing field. And I think that we have this ability called our intuition, which allows us to tune into the least painful decisions. And I don't mean the least painful from the ego's perspective, because a lot of times if we are living out of alignment with our true selves and we are faced with a decision to choose to live in alignment with what we really want or keep living out of alignment, the ego will fight and will say, well, it's going to be way more painful to let go of everything I've built than it will be to live my authentic truth. And you have to see beyond the ego. You have to see beyond that fear. You have to see into what I'm really talking about, which is the divinity of your truth, your divinity of your unique self, and the divinity of what you really, truly want and what would truly benefit your soul and your spirit. And this question is always dangerous because we want to make sure that we're not harming anyone with these actions, with these ideas, with this embodiment of our truth. And my philosophy, my belief, is that deep down, we are all in harmony with each other. So when you do supersede fear and you supersede pain and you go beyond these things and you feel into who you really are and what you really want, you tap into this space of divinity, which is in alignment with all one. And so I don't think from that place, truly, if you're really listening to your intuition, I really truly believe that all hearts are connected to the same harmonious outcome, which is not that everyone acts the same way, but that everyone acts in a way that is the most beneficial for the symbiosis of the whole. That you as an individual are actually acting in a way that is the most nourishing for yourself. And when you nourish yourself, you're nourishing others. You're expanding that nourishment out into the world. I don't believe that you could be in your highest alignment and somehow be harming other people. I don't think that really exists in the divine reality. I think that there is actually one path for each of us, and that one path for each of us leads us to this beautiful, harmonious reality for everyone. And if we're all in alignment with that, that's when we're in Unitopia. So our intuition is a programmed compass that guides us to feeling good. And everything that we do teaches us lessons and teaches us more about that compass. So even if you do something that hurts someone else or something else that people would call evil or bad, or maybe you feel like you made a bad decision in the past, all that that's doing for you is teaching you about your intuition, which is your internal compass, to finding out how not to make those decisions which are painful, to find out how to use your intuition to find that alignment with the divine energy of who you really are and what you really want. Once again, the ego finds it offensive that you don't have power and control over your destiny. But once you get into 5D and you realize that you are actually totally humbled in the mystery of life, and that you are here just to serve your higher self, and you put yourself into that energy of absolutely serving that internal voice, that intuition, and you really let go of your previous assumptions of good decisions or bad decisions. There's another quote I really like. It's actually from a song, and it says, "There are no wrong decisions, only decisions you make." So when you're really in 5D, you've really let go of your ego attachment to defining things as good or bad. You see the beauty and the value in every single thing. So you've mastered that middle space of seeing the value or suffering, and you've come into the state of not suffering. You've come into the state of seeing the value. And you see the value in all things. You see the value in all the decisions you ever made. You see the value in all the suffering you ever had. You see the value in every person. You see the value in every moment. And it's so humbling because you realize that your egoic perception could never have gotten you to this place, that you had to let go of that. And actually, that when you do, and when you surrender to this higher divine wisdom, that it's actually so much better than trying to have control over your destiny. And that doesn't mean you don't still care about things or still work towards things, but it stops becoming a decision. Because once you enter into that 5D space, and this reason why I'm doing this sermon is because I noticed recently, I heard people talking about making decisions, and I thought, I haven't made a decision in years. And I was like, what's that about? It's because I've ascended past the feeling of needing to make decisions, and I totally and wholeheartedly listen to my intuition, and I know what the right thing to do is in any moment, and I never second guess it, and I never doubt it, and it never leads me astray. It's not always comfortable. I'm not always having a blast. People tell me, why are you doing things so difficult for yourself? And I think there's only one way to do things, and that's in alignment with my truth. I am so tuned into my intuition now that it's become this feeling of not even understanding this idea of making decisions, but rather of being in alignment with who I am, with my values, with my goals, with my principles, and behaving in that way. And I have to do a lot of meditation and a lot of internal check-ins to make sure I'm in alignment. I mean, sometimes I'm on the phone with people and all I'm doing is connecting my chakras and letting my higher self through. And sometimes I'm navigating situations where I thought it was going to be one way and it ends up another way. And all I have to do is open up my chakras and let my higher self in. I have to move out of the way and surrender my assumption of how things turn out so that the truth can come in, so that the light can come in, so that I can be true to myself and true to what I really want, and go beyond that fear and go beyond that need for power and control. The funny thing is that if you're in a 3D space, you're going to see that humility as a negative thing. I remember I was hanging out with some people who were in charge of the Violet Flame St. Germain Foundation chapter of Seattle. And this beautiful woman named Anastasia, she's just an absolute angel. I said, wow, I can't believe, all that you all have accomplished, and like all that you're doing here with this church. It's so beautiful. Like, it's awesome that it's still going, and it's so cool that you organize all this stuff. And she said, well, it's not me. It's the divine working through me. And at the time, I thought, what a pushover. You got to take pride in what you do. You got to take pride in like your responsibility for these things. And she completely was humbled and stepped out of the way and was allowing the divine to work through her. And my perception of that was that she was disempowered. At the time, my perception of that was that she was disempowered and that she wasn't getting the benefits of her work. But once you actually cross over into that space of actually stepping over into the divine energy and allowing the divine to work through you, you actually really do feel like it's an honor. It's an absolute honor to be guided by this energy, which is so much greater than our egos could ever dream. And it gets us everything we ever wanted. And it's just this amazing light. So the ego thinks that humility is shameful. But once you're in 5D, you realize that the humility isn't meant to be shameful. It actually elevates you into the flow of life. So maybe we don't have free will, and maybe that's not such a bad thing. I think that we can prove that we don't have free will just from recognizing that time isn't real and that there's predeterminism and that we would probably make the same decisions at every point, no matter what we were faced with. But I don't think that free will is really about what we think it's about. I think it's more about the ability to tune into our intuition and to actually step into the divine fate, which isn't so much rooted in this physical 3D reality, but in the feeling, in that feeling of forgiveness in your heart being weighed against a feather, in the feeling of knowing that you're speaking your truth and you're not weighed down by shame or guilt or fear or trauma. If you're stressed about making a decision, ask yourself if you are making that decision out of trauma, fear, your upbringing, your avoidance of pain, your previous experience, your lack of guidance or information. And ask yourself what your higher self would do. Sit in meditation with your spine straight. Open up your chakras, drink a lot of water, connect with your higher self. Ask for guidance from something higher. And allow that guidance to guide your life. Because maybe, I keep thinking that maybe we're all under the control of cordyceps mushrooms, right? Because the way that cordyceps mushrooms interact in the world, if you don't know about it, I mean, you could look it up, but they're totally brainwashing mushrooms, and it seems like mushrooms are a higher intelligence. And there's a chance that we are absolutely under the conscious control of mushroom spores. Like, I don't think it's that hard to believe. And you know, when you think about it that way, it's like, are we working to work towards this greater good just for a species of mushrooms? If there is a God and we don't have free will and we're just doing whatever God wants us to do. I was wearing my God's Bitch t-shirt this morning. If we are just these slaves to God, this is the ego's version of reality, right? If we are these versions of slaves to this higher power and we feel happiness, we feel less suffering when we jump on board with this higher dictator's reality. What more can we do in that space? Our goal in life is to feel good. It's to feel peace. It's to have experiences that nurture us and nourish us and entertain us. So even if we're not on our own agenda, and we're on the agenda of some alien consciousness or God consciousness or whatever, and if we're part of that consciousness and we are tuning into our feeling state, and we're saying, I feel good when I do this. You know, with the cordyceps, it's like they have the ants doing things that ants would never do. And I'm assuming the ants feel good while they're doing those things. So maybe we're all brainwashed by God. Maybe we are. But I really, truly believe that if we are using our internal intuition, even if it's corrupted by some other mind control force, that ultimately that good feeling and that that understanding of truth and justice inside of ourselves, for our decisions, is leading us into something that is truly beneficial for everyone in the universe. I really feel that way. It's great questions, you know. It really is. It can freak you out if you think too much about free will. It can. So take a break if you're feeling overwhelmed thinking about free will. But your own internal guidance towards your own experience of happiness is the best indicator you have that you're on the right path. And that's what I follow. So I'd love to see people's comments on this topic if you have any other ideas or this caused you to think in a certain way. Unimagic says, once any system starts ingesting its own output, it quickly becomes non-deterministic. And this is probably a little bit of a reference to being a closed loop. I am a closed loop, right? Or is that what it's called? But the idea that we're inputting our own thoughts, we're taking in our own actions, and we're thinking about our decisions, and we're making decisions based on our previous experiences and things like that. Again, this topic is so expansive and so interesting, and I would love to hear more of your ideas. So go ahead and comment in this video, and I hope you all have a beautiful and blessed day. Uni bless.